Welcome back, everybody. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Today we're tackling something I think is on a lot of people's minds these days, artificial intelligence.
Definitely one of the hottest topics.
It is. And, we try to go deep on this show, so we've got a ton of material to work with. We watched that 60 Minutes episode on AI a while back, and then I pulled a whole stack of articles.
I did the same. It's really fascinating stuff.
It is. It's fascinating and kind of scary all at the same time, honestly.
Yeah, no kidding.
So our mission today is to kind of like cut through the hype, because you hear so much about AI these days.
So much hype.
And we want to give you a balanced view, both the incredible potential, which there's tons of, but also the risks.
Yep, the risks are real, especially that hallucination problem. Have you read much about that?
I have. It's a bit freaky to think about, honestly. Like, on the one hand, you've got AI that can teach itself chess strategies that humans have never even dreamt of?
Right. Mapping protein structures in seconds.
Yeah,
Stuff that used to take years.
Exactly. Just imagine what that could mean for medicine if we can analyze proteins that quickly.
Absolutely. Game changer.
But then you read about that lawyer who used an AI program to do his legal research, and he ended up submitting totally fabricated case law to the court.
Yeah, saw that one. Not good.
Talk about a wake-up call, right? It's
Yeah.
like, whoa, this stuff is powerful, but it can go off the rails in a hurry.
Definitely a double-edged sword.
Big time. So let's start with some of the awe-inspiring stuff, just to set the stage. Remember in that 60 Minutes piece, they showed those robots learning to play soccer?
Oh, yeah, the ones that were totally autonomous.
Yes, like they weren't programmed with specific moves or strategies. They figured it out themselves through trial and error.
And they were pulling off these insane moves, like strategies the engineers had never even seen before.
I know, it was wild. And they were winning.
Well, that's the thing, right? It's not just that they're learning, it's that they're coming up with solutions that are better than what humans have come up with.
It really makes you wonder, what are the limits here? I mean, if AI can master something as complex as soccer just by watching and experimenting, what else can it do?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. They call it emergent properties. Basically, the AI starts to exhibit behaviors that go beyond what it was explicitly programmed to do.
So it's like it's developing its own internal logic, its own problem-solving skills.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so powerful and potentially unpredictable.
Okay, so help me understand this. How does the AI even begin to grasp something as complex as soccer? Is it actually watching and analyzing the game like a human would?
Well, not exactly like a human, but it is analyzing massive amounts of data. In this case, probably hours and hours of soccer footage. It looks for patterns, identifies successful strategies, and then starts experimenting.
So it's not thinking like a human, but it's arriving at solutions that are sometimes even better than what humans can come up with.
That's the crazy part. And we're seeing this across all sorts of fields, not just games.
Right, like you mentioned protein folding.
Exactly. AI is now able to analyze the structure of a protein and predict how it will fold into a 3D shape, which is crucial for understanding its function.
And they're doing this in seconds or minutes, right? When it used to take, years?
And sometimes even longer. It's truly remarkable.
It is. It really makes you wonder, what are the limits? If AI can already do all of this, what will it be capable of in 5 years, 10 years?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's what makes this whole field so exciting, but also a bit unnerving.
Right. I mean, it's amazing to think about all the good that AI could do, like curing diseases, solving climate change, all that. But it also raises some pretty big questions about the future of work,
For sure.
about creativity, even about what it means to be human.
Exactly. And that's where those risks we talked about earlier come into play. Because along with all this incredible potential comes the possibility of misuse, unintended consequences, and yes, those hallucinations you mentioned.
Okay, so let's dig into that a bit more. When we say an AI is hallucinating, what exactly do we mean? Because it's not like it's seeing things, right?
Right. No, not visual hallucinations. It's more about the AI generating outputs, text, code, even decisions that seem plausible at first glance, but are actually based on faulty logic, incomplete data, or even just made up.
So in that lawyer's case, the AI was spitting out these legal precedents that sounded legitimate, but they were totally fabricated.
Precisely. And that's what makes these hallucinations so tricky. They can be really hard to spot, especially if you're not an expert in the specific field the AI is operating in.
Yeah, one of the experts we read said that AI is actually getting really good at blending truth and falsehood so seamlessly that it can be almost impossible to tell a difference.
That's a major concern, especially as we rely more and more on algorithms to filter information, make decisions, even write news articles.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the big question is, why does this happen? Why do these AI systems hallucinate in the first place?
Well, there are a few reasons. One is bad data. If the AI is trained on biased or inaccurate information, it's going to learn the wrong things and produce flawed outputs.
Makes sense. Garbage in, garbage out.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's not just about the quality of the data, it's also about how the AI processes that data. There's something called overfitting, where the AI gets so good at analyzing its training data that it can't handle anything new or unexpected.
Ah, okay. So it's like it becomes too specialized, too focused on the specific data it was trained on.
Exactly. It's like teaching a kid with a bunch of outdated textbooks. They're going to come out with some pretty skewed views.
Right. So how do we prevent this from happening? How do we make sure these AI systems are producing reliable, trustworthy outputs?
That's the real challenge. And there's no easy fix. But researchers are working on a number of approaches.
Like what? Give us some hope here.
Well, one is to use more diverse and higher quality data to train AI models, making sure it represents a wider range of perspectives and scenarios. That's a big one.
So we need to teach the AI to think more critically, to be able to generalize and adapt to new information, not just blindly follow patterns.
Exactly. And another approach is to make AI models more transparent and accountable. This involves developing techniques to track how the AI arrives at its conclusions, almost like giving it a chain of thought we can follow and analyze.
That's a really interesting idea. So it's not just about the answer, it's about showing its work, like we used to have to do in math class.
Exactly. It's like, show me your reasoning, AI. Don't just give me a random answer.
I like that. So even with all these safeguards, is there still a risk that these AI systems will eventually outsmart us? I mean, they're learning and evolving so rapidly, it's kind of freaky to think about.
It's a question that's been debated for decades, and it's only going to become more relevant as AI continues to advance. But one thing to remember is that even the most sophisticated AI systems today are still tools. They're extensions of human ingenuity, designed to help us solve problems and expand our capabilities.
That's reassuring in a way. But it also makes you wonder, if AI is already this powerful, what happens when it does surpass human intelligence? What does that mean for our future?
That's a question we'll definitely be exploring further as we continue our deep dive. Because the truth is, we're all on this journey together, figuring out how to navigate this uncharted territory of artificial intelligence.
And the more we understand about its potential and its risks, the better equipped we'll be to shape a future where AI benefits all of humanity.
Couldn't agree more.
It's like, okay, AI can beat us at chess, that's impressive. But when you see it creating art, writing stories, that's when it starts to get a little, I don't know, unnerving.
Yeah, it's definitely crossing into some new territory. One of the articles I read talked about Google's AI, Bard. I don't know if you've played around with it much.
A little bit, yeah. It's crazy what it can do.
It can whip up a Hemingway-esque short story in seconds, translate languages. It can even write poetry.
Poetry, that's the one that really trips me out. Poetry feels so, I don't know, personal, an expression of the soul. How can an algorithm capture that?
That's a great question. And honestly, I don't know if anyone has a definitive answer. It wasn't programmed to write poetry specifically. It learned by analyzing vast amounts of text, including poetry from all different eras.
So it's mimicking patterns. Or is there something more going on, some kind of, I hesitate to say, spark of creativity, even if it's not human creativity?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Like, if you ask Bard to summarize the New Testament, it can do it in a few sentences.
Yeah.
It can even do it in Latin if you want. Impressive, sure. But is it actually understanding those profound spiritual themes, the human drama?
That's what's so unsettling. It can produce these outputs that are technically brilliant, but does it actually understand the meaning behind them, the emotion?
And that brings us back to something we touched on earlier, AI hallucinations. When we talk about bad data and overfitting. Well, there's another piece of the puzzle, something called grounding.
Grounding. Okay, I haven't heard that one before. What does that mean in the context of AI?
Basically, it's about whether the AI has a real-world understanding of the things it's working with. Does it get it?
So it's like a parrot that can mimic human speech. It can string words together but doesn't actually understand what it's saying.
That's a great analogy. And that lack of grounding can lead to some, well, pretty bizarre and potentially dangerous outcomes. One of the articles I read talked about this case in Australia where an AI system falsely accused a mayor of bribery.
Oh, wow.
It had access to tons of data about him, but it misconstrued connections, drew completely wrong conclusions.
Yikes. Imagine the damage that could do to someone's reputation, their career, all based on an AI's misinterpretation.
Exactly. And that's why people like Tim McGarbush, he's a leading AI ethicist, are really pushing for more transparency in AI development. If we're going to trust these systems with important decisions, we need to be sure they're not just making stuff up.
Makes sense. It's like you wouldn't let a self-driving car on the road without rigorous testing.
Right. And it's not just about preventing intentional misuse, it's about the unintended consequences, too.
Like what?
Well, one of the things that keeps coming up is how AI systems can perpetuate, even amplify, existing biases.
Oh, yeah, like that study about facial recognition software being less accurate at identifying people with darker skin tones.
Exactly. That's a scary example of how AI could actually exacerbate inequality if we're not careful.
It's like the AI is only as good as the data it's trained on, right? If the data itself is biased, the AI is going to be biased.
Exactly. It's like teaching a child prejudiced views. They're likely to grow up with those same prejudices.
So we need to make sure that the AI is not just technically sound, but also ethically sound.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to have a diverse range of voices involved in developing these systems. It can't just be engineers and computer scientists. We need ethicists, social scientists, people from all walks of life to make sure AI is used for good, not for harm.
Speaking of which, that 60 Minutes piece had that segment on AI being used in schools in China to monitor student emotions. Did you see that?
Yeah, that was fascinating. That system was developed by the Talal Education Group.
Right, and it's meant to help teachers track student engagement in real time, like who's paying attention, who's struggling, who might have a particular aptitude.
Exactly. The idea is to personalize learning, to tailor instruction to each student's needs.
That sounds great in theory, but I don't know, something about it feels a little creepy. Like, do we really want machines judging human
That's a
emotions?
valid concern,
Yeah,
and it raises a lot of questions about privacy, about consent,
rare.
especially when it comes to kids.
Right. Parents should definitely have a say in how their kids' data is being used, especially for something like this.
Absolutely. It's a tricky balance because the potential benefits are huge, but we need to be very careful about the potential downsides too.
It's like we're at this crossroads with AI, where we have this incredible technology that could revolutionize so many aspects of our lives, but we need to proceed with caution.
I totally agree.
One of the things that really blew my mind was this idea that AI might one day achieve consciousness, like actual self-awareness. Is that even possible?
It's a question that's been debated for centuries, probably. And as AI gets more sophisticated, that debate is only going to intensify.
Yeah, the CEO of DeepMind, Demis Hassabis, he said in the 60 Minutes episode that he believes it's possible, but that we're not there yet.
Right. But even if it is possible, what would that even look like? Would an AI's consciousness be anything like ours?
I have no idea. It's mind-boggling.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it brings us back to those emergent properties we talked about. If AI can already do things we didn't program it to do, things that surprise us, what happens when it starts to think for itself, to develop its own goals, its own desires?
Okay, now we're getting into some serious sci-fi territory.
Yeah, but it's not as far-fetched as it might seem. And it's a conversation we need to be having now while we still have time to influence the direction of AI development.
Before things get too far out of hand.
Exactly. The choices we make today, the guidelines we establish, the values we embed in these systems, all of that is going to shape the future of AI.
It's a lot to wrap our heads around, but it's also incredibly exciting. I mean, we're living in a time when we're literally pushing the boundaries of what's possible,
Yeah.
exploring the very nature of intelligence. It's wild.
It's definitely a wild ride.
Yeah.
And it's only going to get wilder from here on out.
It's crazy to think, right? Like all this talk about AI taking our jobs,
Yeah.
but it's also creating a ton of new ones.
Oh, absolutely.
You've got the obvious ones like developers and engineers, but it goes way beyond that.
It really does.
I mean, you've got ethicists and philosophers and artists, even writers.
It's wild how it's all kind of coming together.
It is wild. Like AI is this catalyst that's shaking things up and making us rethink how we do everything.
Totally agree. Like how we work, how we create, even what it means to be human.
I know. One of the articles I read was talking about DeepMind.
Oh,
They're
did it?
only like 12 years old as a company.
Really that young?
Yeah, and they're already making history with these AI breakthroughs.
Well, they're the ones behind AlphaZero.
Right. The program that mastered chess.
Like, just crushed it.
Crushed it by coming up with these totally unheard of
The
strategies.
ones that had grandmasters just, like, scratching their head.
I know, like, how did it even think of that?
And then their work on protein folding, too.
Right, like solving a problem that would taken us humans forever.
Eons. It's mind-boggling what these systems are already capable of.
It really makes you question, like, is there anything AI can't do? And it's not just science either.
No, not at all.
AI is being used to compose music, create art,
Write novel.
entire novels. It really makes you wonder, what does it even mean to be creative in this age of AI?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Like, if an algorithm can paint a masterpiece or write a symphony,
Yeah.
does that somehow devalue human creativity?
Or does it redefine it?
Right. Like, maybe it's both. Some people say that AI is just a tool.
Like a paintbrush or a piano?
Right. And that it's still the human artist who's bringing the real creativity.
Makes sense.
But then you see these systems coming up with ideas and styles that humans haven't even thought of.
It makes you wonder.
It does. Like, maybe there's something more going on there.
Like AI is actually expanding the definition of what's possible.
Right. Both technically and creatively.
And it's making us rethink our assumptions about, well, everything.
I know. It's like, what even is art? What is intelligence?
What is consciousness?
Whoa, okay, now we're getting deep.
I know, right?
But it's true. AI is forcing us to ask these big questions.
Absolutely.
One of the quotes that really stuck with me was from Kai-Fu Lee.
Oh, yeah. What did he say?
He said that AI doesn't diminish humanity. It actually raises us to even deeper, more profound questions.
I like that. It's true. We're confronted with this amazing technology that can do these incredible things.
Things we never thought possible.
And it's making us ask, like, what does it even mean to be human?
I know, it's a lot to take in.
It's a bit overwhelming.
It is, but it's also exciting.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, we're living through this technological revolution, and we get to be a part of shaping it.
We do. We're right at the forefront.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It is.
So I guess as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what's the one thing you want to leave our listeners with?
That's a good question.
Like, what should they be thinking about as they go back out into the world where, let's face it, AI is already everywhere?
I'd say stay curious, keep learning,
Keep learning.
and engage in those conversations about what it all means, the big picture stuff.
The ethical questions, the societal impacts.
Exactly, because this isn't just some abstract concept. This is shaping our lives right now.
And the future isn't set in stone. It's being shaped by the choices we make today.
That's right, by the questions we ask, by the values we prioritize.
So it's a future we all have a role in creating.
Absolutely, and that's pretty powerful when you think about it.
It is. It's a lot of responsibility, too.
It is, but it's also incredibly exciting. So, yeah, stay engaged, stay informed, and let's see where this amazing technology takes us.
Great advice. I think that's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining me for another deep dive.
My pleasure. Always fun chatting with you.